Michigan. We're in Greater Detroit. Someone's holding up their phone, says "Lose Yourself," and I'm kind of thinking like, oh God, do I really want Vampire Weekend playing "Lose Yourself"? But then I realized, but then the band starts going dun dun dun, and then I said to the audience, I was like, all right, you guys do it. And then
did they know it? Did they do it?
oh yeah, they know every word. Hello.
How are you?
I'm great.
I really love the record.
Oh, thank you.
And welcome to Canada.
Thanks.
You guys must have played here a bunch.
Oh yeah, many times.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like, I guess Toronto or...
Oh, the whole country?
Did you do mainly the Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver thing?
We've played, Calgary as well, Edmonton. Yeah, we were in Vancouver just a few months ago.
That must be like a nice thing for a band when they're starting out to... I guess the first international dates must be in Canada.
Yeah. In fact, I remember maybe it was our first Toronto show at some tiny club, and I remember going on and on the mic about what's up, Canada, or something. And I remember I got a message later, which I never forgot, from somebody, probably on MySpace. That's how long ago it was, saying, just say Toronto.
Yeah, right.
Like, we get it. You're in a new country, but we're a big country just like the U.S. And it's like, yes, I'm never going to come back to a Canadian city and go on about Canada.
Hey, you're in Edmonton. Hi, Canada.
Right.
How's it going, Canada? Let's. I want to listen to a little bit of the new record. Just take a listen to this.
Sure.
Fuck the world. You said it quiet. No one could hear you. No one but me. Cynical. You can't deny it. You don't want to win this war, 'cause you don't want the peace.
From Only God Was Above Us, that is Ice Cream Piano. The opening lyrics of that caught me off guard a little bit. And I kind of wanted to use it as a jump-off point to talk a little bit about maybe your own thoughts going into this record. But maybe talk to me lyrically about where that song came from.
One thing's for sure, this album, which there has a touch of darkness, I've ultimately been describing it as optimistic. So even that, it was important to me that those opening lines, I put in quotation marks, because it's a dialogue. It's not a statement. Somebody making that statement, and then the song is about cynicism and about the kind of self-sabotage. The hook of that section is, you don't want to win this war because you don't want the peace. So ultimately, it's about trying to move past that kind of negative worldview.
If I'm understanding you correctly, like when you were making the record, you were thinking about sort of cynicism and darkness, and you were trying to move towards the hope, or you were trying to move towards the optimism? Yeah.
And in some ways, I think I've been, pretty cynical and negative my whole life. I mean, which, I've always tried in Vampire Weekend to not shy away from having moments of joy. Probably people think of our first album, A-Punk. There is a lot of fun in it.
Yeah.
But it's, I think it's very easy to kind of move towards a cynical, negative worldview. And frankly, I think in my younger days, I just didn't know any other way. It's kind of feel like that's what I was surrounded by.
Isn't that the opposite? Aren't you supposed to start hopeful and joyful, and then as you get more inclined to the world's evils, you become cynical and crooked as you get older?
Yeah, well, okay, maybe I'm going back to not my early days, but when I think about from being a tween on a little bit, I grew up in the 90s. It was a time of
I guess so,
angst and cynicism, and people telling you, don't believe what you're seeing. Everybody's trying to sell you something, that kind of stuff. So, and all of which is true. And I think that's what's interesting. I think a lot of people hit a place in their life where they realize, like, oh yeah, it's easy to be cynical for good reason. It's not like you were under some illusion that, no, things are great. It's really just about your approach to it. And, to me, that's one of the major challenges of any life, is to say, these are these aspects of reality, good and bad. How are you going to feel about it?
So what changed, and how did what you were thinking about in terms of those changes make it to this record?
I mean, a million things. Obviously, just getting older. I just turned 40 to feels like a bit of a milestone. But, also just having, a true entering, like true adulthood with new kinds of responsibilities. Yeah, I don't know, just kind of like spending time with other people who had different perspectives on things. Yeah, I don't know. It's a million little things.
It's interesting anyway. It's
Yeah.
interesting because not everyone gets there. Some people stay mired in cynicism their entire lives. I think what I find interesting is not only did you find your way towards optimism and hope in a time of, just to use that quote off the top,
Right.
the quote is right
Yeah.
in a certain way of looking at the world. I mean, we're constantly flooded by anger and cynicism, and there's the memes I see on Instagram every day are about how the world is broken and
Right.
the world's on fire and this is fine. I don't mean to pry into your own personal psyche. I just find it really interesting that you can find yourself in like deep cynicism and find yourself in a place of hope and then want to make a
Well,
record about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to it. I mean, I'll tell you one thing is, I don't think I'd ever met somebody until my wife who seemed to take aspects of religion seriously. And she's somebody who grew up with a lot of different religions. Her parents came from, had backgrounds including Judaism and Christianity, and she also grew up going to a Hindu ashram, and she studied religion in college. And in some ways, just even being exposed to some of the oldest ideas about dealing with a broken world, understanding those aspects of reality, it's just something I'd never taken seriously, although I had been drawn, like many songwriters before me, to the rich language of mysticism and spirituality. I hesitate to say religion, such a trigger word for people.
For sure, but it was you were lyrically you were sort of wearing the beads, but you weren't in the pew necessarily back then.
Yeah, and it's interesting to kind of reflect now that it's something that I'm more interested in. When I look back on songs in the Vampire Weekend catalog, notably on our Modern Vampires of the City album, there's a song called Yahweh, which, is essentially referencing the word Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back, like, why was I so drawn to that concept? What did that even mean? And, I think I was presented with a certain binary growing up of either you believe this set of kind of uncomfortable, dogmatic beliefs, or you don't. I just never saw a third way. It's, I can say, I think just getting older, it's important to, one way or another to, examine the nature of reality, ask the big questions. And, those are things I think when you're talking about like the bliss of childhood and stuff, I think about like kids, now I have a kid who's a little kid, and,
Mm-hmm.
and I think about it's not all, kids have big emotions too. It's not, we kind of look back and say, oh, when I was a kid, everything was easy. But one thing about kids, they ask really big, profound questions. And sometimes you think back to your own childhood and think, in some ways, those are the times where I question the nature of reality the most.
Yeah.
Like when you're a kid and you say your name over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to have a different feeling about,
Am I Ezra? Am I Ezra? Or am I someone named Ezra?
exactly.
Yeah.
And then at some point you say, whoever I am, I better just stick with this and deal with life. And then there's something pleasant about returning to those big questions, because they really can provide an anchor in when you face the daily turmoil.
What went through your mind in terms of reflecting on the old Ezra when I played you that song in the introduction?
A-Punk? I mean,
Who was that guy?
yeah, it's funny. It all. Yeah, when I think back, I do vividly remember kind of writing that guitar riff, and the first time I jammed on it with anybody, I was just sitting with CT in his parents' garage, basically. The song feels very alive, like you said. For me as well, it doesn't seem super old. And, that's always going to be our most instantly recognizable song. So, just last night played it to, 7,000 people and just like the room lights up. So in that sense, it doesn't feel too nostalgic. You're getting like a real-time reaction. And in some ways, it's as exciting as it was back in the day. But when I think about writing it, like I always had a sense of where Vampire Weekend might head. So even though that song has like a lightness to it and a fun to it, even as we were making that music, I was always excited because we were starting a story, and I knew that there were going to be like subsequent chapters.
You knew there were going to be other albums. You knew there were going to be other sort of
Yeah, and in some ways that's why I wanted to be a musician, because I just grew up loving, for lack of a better word, discographies.
You wanted to be prolific.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say prolific because I'm extremely slow, but I like the idea of how records work together. And, when I think about the music that we've made since then, I don't think, wow, that was a totally different time. It feels very connected.
So what was it like when that dream becomes more possible? Like with that first record, because I was just telling you before we turned the microphones on that you and I had some friends in common, and those friends in common toured with you when you guys were like opening up, when you were, things were still starting out. And I remember my buddy telling me it was amazing that we kind of saw it happen in real time. We saw them go from opening shows to headlining shows.
Yeah.
We saw that record just blow up within a matter of weeks. That must be unmooring too, or it must be exciting too, because, oh, hey, I've always dreamt about being an artist with a discography. I've always dreamt about being this way. Oh my God, it's entirely possible right now. What do you remember about that period?
That was definitely an exciting period. It did feel like things started to happen very quickly, and we had to keep up, and we, worked very hard to follow up our first album with our second album. They came out with just under 2 years. So when I think about that whole time, which is basically my 20s, it was a lot of touring, a lot of shows, a lot of work, and and an excitement, but also a bit of an exhaustion, because it felt like we were being presented with a golden opportunity that we couldn't mess up. And also, when you're young and you're experiencing criticism for the first time, you literally have people, understandably, I can understand why, discussing, well, here's a new band. Is it like, flavor of the month? Is the next album going to be the classic sophomore slump? And so you're taking in all that information, and it's kind of stressful. So I look back at it as an exciting time, but I'm not overly nostalgic about it, because it's not hard for me to recall the stress and the feelings of what's going to happen if this doesn't work out.
Sure. On the outside, to me, I remember when that record blew up. Like it was exciting, and we were the toast of the town, and we were in every review, and we were, we went from playing X amount to Y amount, much bigger. But with that comes expectations. With that becomes, oh, this band might be the generational band, and they better deliver. Well,
yes, some people felt that way, and some people were probably, short selling us, betting that we would be a classic, like one and done flop, and both were equally plausible. And I think also because at that phase of my life, I didn't. It felt very high stakes. I often think to myself too. The last job I had before the band took off was being a teacher, and at the time, I think I enjoyed elements of being a teacher, but I also felt like, I didn't choose to do this. This is not my dream. It's not my passion. Whereas I've been reflecting now, maybe, since like turning 40, and I think about, what if I had stayed a teacher? And I really wish I could go back and say to myself, that would be fine too. I couldn't accept that at the time, because I felt like, no, we have a band, we're pretty good. We have to do all these things. But I wish I could like relieve some of that stress and say to myself, yeah, being a teacher is important too. Like it's, if the band makes one album, you come back, you start teaching again, then that can be a really rewarding life too. Which is not to say that I don't appreciate where I'm at, but again, that was, everything felt so high stakes.
Did you back then? Did you have this feeling of, if only I blah, then I'll be happy, or like if only I blah, then if only I get this, or if only my band does this, then we're good. Then I'm good.
Yeah, of course. There was definitely that feeling of, and people have teased me about the fact that I've said, and I really meant it every time, okay, if we can get through the second album, then we got something really stable. If we can get through 3 albums, we can get through 4, we get through 5. And it is true, maybe only now with 5 albums, all of which I really believe in, can I say, well, that feels like a career. That's something we can, that's something solid. But yeah, what you're talking about, the belief that happiness only comes from achieving your dreams, that's always, it's such a double-edged sword, the concept of dream achievement, because the paradox is most people's dream, including mine, is really just to be happy.
Yeah.
When you get rid of all the specifics. And maybe that's something that I've realized is when I think back to that time of stress and everything feeling high stakes is, I've met so many people now in my life, including people who are infinitely more successful than me, who are some of the most stressed out, miserable people you can imagine. And I've also met people who've watched opportunities come and go, but have such like a deep understanding of life. And anyway, maybe that's why this impulse comes that, I wish I could say to myself, Vampire Weekend, Teacher in Brooklyn,
Fine.
They're both paths.
Yeah.
It's about your attitude, and obviously both could be rewarding, because you see the musician and teacher are both incredibly rewarding jobs for many people.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly what I was trying to get at there,
Right.
was the idea that I think, especially in the arts or in music or in film or anything really, you believe that, all right, well, I'm not feeling good yet, but I think once I do this, I'll feel good, or if I win that, I'll feel good. But
Yeah, and of course I have to recognize that by doing this for 15 pushing 20 years, I've gotten to see some degree of success in music and look around, and by having that look around, that's the paradox. I have some understanding that would probably be valuable to the version of myself that didn't take a look around.
I can just say you guys seem to be having a lot of fun these days.
Yeah, I mean that's what's important too. When I think back to my 20s, I really didn't enjoy touring.
Why not?
Well, I'd never done it before, so I was doing it for the first time and kind of feeling like, oh, this isn't that fun. Being away from home and being tired all the time. I didn't have great vocal technique either. Might surprise people to learn I'm not a trained singer. I have a somewhat idiosyncratic style, and so when we started, I'd be so scared of losing my voice all the time, and sometimes I did. One time, my voice was gone between sound check and a show in Seattle, and I had to listen to our tour manager go tell 3,000 people, sorry, the band can't play, and I was listening to the booze, and I'm just sitting there with my
Booze.
well, understandably, they
the
got
poor tour manager though.
Yeah.
I know.
and I feel for the crowd. They schlepped out to this place, and they didn't get a show. So anyway, that made touring a bit unpleasant at times. And I think also my first love was albums and recording. I didn't grow up going to a ton of shows, so in a way I needed to learn what's so special about this. And that's something that I think on the Father of the Bride tour, I finally started to understand a little bit. Like, how are we going to make this more fun for the audience, more fun for us? And of course, it's not rocket science. Switch up the set list a little bit. Try some new stuff every now and then. Change a couple songs to have some surprises. And suddenly we're putting our heads together more regularly about, what's it going to be like tonight? And that's only continued onto this tour. So those kinds of things have made a huge difference.
I saw was it in Michigan the other night? I don't know if it was last night or the night before.
Yeah, we were just outside Detroit last night.
You did a bunch of Bob Seger songs and an Eminem song?
Well, it is my favorite part of the show, but now we go out after the main set and we kind of say, all right, this is request time, but we literally don't know them. We have some amazing musicians in the band, so we can usually do maybe a verse and a chorus of just about any song. Sometimes it's a total train wreck, but it is fun for us, and I think it's fun for most of the audience in real time to have somebody call out something. So somebody just holding up their phone said Bob Seger, and just I started thinking, I was like, I like that song, We Got Tonight, start singing it. Then we did a little bit of old time rock and roll.
I really like that song.
It's a great song.
Yeah.
And so I imagine some of our more indie, prestige indie fans are probably watching what is happening. But it's also a moment in the show where we get to be a little bit of, just be like a bar band. Not in there's some amazing bar bands, not even a particularly good one because I don't really know the words. Even when the band is like cooking, I can barely keep up, and that adds a degree of surprise too. So like somebody's holding, we're in Michigan, we're in Greater Detroit, someone's holding up their phone, says "Lose Yourself," and I'm kind of thinking like, oh God, do I really want Vampire Weekend playing "Lose Yourself"? But then I realized, the band starts going dun dun dun, and then I said to the audience, I was like, all right, you guys do it. And then
Did they know it? Did they do it?
oh yeah, they know every word. I was having a hard time remembering the opening line, which is palms sweaty. Anyway, then the whole audience is doing it, and it's a little bit corny. It's definitely a wedding band.
Yeah.
It's a vomit on
Palms sweaty,
knees weak. No.
arms are heavy,
Heavy.
got vomit on his sweater already. Mom spaghetti.
The famous mom
Thank you
spaghetti.
very much.
With that one, I backed off the mic because I kind of felt like, this is you're people from Detroit. You guys should do it. But it adds this element of surprise for us. Also, we just did like a 2-hour set, so when we come out and do that, it just feels so light and fun and goofy. And I think that is part of the Vampire Weekend formula is we need a mix of kind of seriousness and goofiness, and that's part of the journey of the show.
I want to talk a little bit about how that might have manifested itself in the record as well. Can we listen to that the Hope song?
The sentencing was overturned. The killer freed the cardigan. A hope betrayed, a lesson learned. I hope you'd let it go. I did the things you asked me to. I testified what wasn't true. But now I lost my faith in you. I hope you'd let it go.
That's a little bit of Hope from the new Vampire Weekend album, Only God Was Above Us. 8 minutes too.
Yeah, and it's even longer live.
When you mentioned the prestige indie audiences, furrowing their brows as you play Bob Seger and the fun crowd enjoying their funness, I wonder if time, all this stuff we're talking about, time, appreciating what kind of artist you want to be, realizing that pressure you felt in your early 20s was maybe all for naught. Is it freeing you up as a songwriter too, as well as a performer?
I don't write a lot.
Really?
Yeah, I can't tell if it's a problem or a gift. I've gotten too good at chilling in my life. I do feel like when we work really hard and then I get home, I don't like to sit in front of the piano or the guitar all the time. I mean, like once in a while, I'll be like watching TV and maybe I'm always noodling. Sometimes that'll turn into something.
But you're not Rivers Cuomo writing a song a day.
No, and I admire that, and I've wondered if it would be better for me and for the band if I developed a practice. But so far so good.
Yeah, you're doing all right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always think too, we've been doing this. The band started when I was 22. I'm 40 now, and I think, what if I turned up the intensity, a little bit more, not even to 11, just to like 9 or 10? Where would Vampire Weekend be? And that what I come up with is, I bet we could have had 7 albums by now instead of 5. And when I think about how weird my life might have become, that who knows if I would have ended up with the right people in my in my day-to-day life. Who knows what our relationships would be like. So then I sometimes think, what if when I really weigh it, what if I'd been a little more of a workaholic and I'd gone harder, I'd been more monomaniacal, I'd had less time to just enjoy life with my friends and family, and what would I have gotten? 7 albums versus 5?
Fine.
Who cares?
Like, are you feeling a little bit more opened up in your writing when you do sit down and write?
Well, I do. I definitely feel like the path of Vampire Weekend has left us at a place where we could do just about anything.
How did you do that?
Diligently trying new things. I think,
That's good. That's good.
hopefully developing an audience that's at least open to hearing new stuff. And yeah, I can say when I compare A Punk on the first album to Hope on the new album, that's quite a journey. But then you look at the steps in between, and maybe it's not so crazy. And yeah, I think just as a songwriter, and maybe that's why it takes so long, I have to think about what feels new or fresh. And the songs that have 5 to 8 verses and are 8 minutes, that's a grand tradition. That's folk music. It's obviously like Bob Dylan and Neil Young, and so in some ways that's something that probably any songwriter wants to try eventually, but you can't force it. And until the song Hope, I didn't really have like a vehicle for it. But I'm glad that we got there. And now when I think about it, yeah, I can just as easily imagine writing a 2-minute kind of indie pop song as I could some kind of like epic Grateful Dead jam, country folk thing. And now I just have to wait and see what comes.
I was wondering about that because I saw you guys did Peggy-O. You did that Grateful Dead song, and then I saw you do Chalk Dust Torture, the Fish tune, with Mike Gordon somewhere. I can't remember.
Yeah, in Seattle.
And for people who are listening to this, these are very big jam tunes to do. How I guess first off, how was that? How was being a jam band for that night?
For CT, our drummer, it was especially a dream come true because he's a lifelong Fish fan. Having Mike Gordon open for us on a run of dates was incredible.
He opened.
Yeah, he did 4 shows with us. So he came out and did a little something.
How did your
night.
audience take it? Did they?
Well, you definitely saw that there's a few people who just showed up for Mike,
right?
Just like ready to dance, and our audience was totally in because it's just like the music, you can like move to it. And so even if you're a little bit unfamiliar with the Fish world, I think they're such icons that I think our audience at bare minimum had some curiosity about like, whoa, Mike Gordon, I've heard of him, like what's up with this? So it was a great combo. That music, which in some ways we're talking about 2 bands, the Grateful Dead and Fish.
Very different bands.
Yeah,
but
very different
what they
bands.
have in common is that they have a legacy of performing long improvised
music
together.
Yeah, exactly. And I can say on the 4th album, Father of the Bride, that music started to mean a lot more to me as somebody who grew up on the East Coast. It's always kind of surrounded by it. I don't think there's anybody from New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania who doesn't know like at least a few Deadheads, a few Fish heads. That music feels like a pillar of the world of music. And I had an experience in between our 3rd and 4th album, which was a time of reflection. Naturally, it's entered my 30s. A certain indie moment kind of felt over, and it's kind of like, well, what are we gonna do now?
You had awareness of that?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was so just even little things like when we first came out, every year there'd be this like focus on South by Southwest. Who's the new indie band this year? Who's the new band this year? And of course you notice when people start talking about bands a little bit less, start to feel like indie's a bit kind of played out. It's actually more interesting to listen to other genres. Often I agreed with these people, so I didn't take it too personally, but it kind of felt like something exciting had happened, and maybe the wave was cresting. Again, these are these things that anybody experiences. When you see a wave crest in a big way for the first time in your life, it does get you more interested in the nature of reality and cycles and the big picture.
Sure.
And so I remember having a slightly aimless feeling, and I went to go see my friend Jake's Grateful Dead cover band, which was all, Jake's a full-time artist, and it was, kind of a side project for all the guys involved.
Is it Joe Russo's Almost Dead?
No. This is they're called Richard Pictures.
Right.
My buddy Jake Longstreth, who's
Just getting down about Grateful Dead cover bands in here. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
But
they're not playing the same kind of rooms as J-Rad.
J-Rad are great, by the way.
No, they're great. But this is way more like local,
Sure.
love of the game type
Got it.
stuff. And when I saw them, this is probably 2014, I remember having a big feeling. I was like, this is the best guitar band I've seen in years. There was something sounded so fresh about them. There's something so pure about their love of the Dead and the way that, what's interesting about Grateful Dead cover bands is it's one of you're obviously in a sense you're copying the songbook of this iconic American band, but you actually get to do your thing with it, which is not true with other types of cover bands. I don't know.
A Police cover band wouldn't get to do that.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear a Police cover band take wrapped around your finger on a ride for 15 minutes and just be like, what are you doing? You're failing as a Police cover band.
Sure.
And I just remember there was something so fresh and exciting about it, and that made a really big impact on me. And even the fact that it was a cover band and everything about that. So I've always shouted out Richard Pictures as being, a pivotal influence in the life of Vampire Weekend. And then I think also, naturally, as you get older, you look to people who had kind of long careers of doing their own thing. And obviously Phish has an incredibly unique relationship with their fans, but one thing about them is you realize, they've just always kind of done their own thing.
Yeah.
And even though we're not a jam band, there's always some inspiration to take from that.
Is there inspiration in your father-in-law? Like, your father-in-law is Quincy Jones, who in terms of doing exactly what he wanted to do and having tremendous amounts of success in the music industry, really mapping popular music. I mean, have you ever talked to him about this? I mean, this is a guy with a tremendous amount of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, he's such an icon. His career is so incredible that, I always feel a little bit sheepish when, and he's an incredibly sweet guy. Every time he sees me, he asks me, how's Vampire Weekend doing? Mm-hmm. Like, he's very kind.
That's really nice.
As you might expect. Yeah. He's an amazing person. In some ways, when I think about him, obviously I didn't know him the way that Rashida did. Mm-hmm. Being a little girl and watching your dad become a global superstar in his early 50s because he just produced Thriller. Yeah. I haven't seen those moments or him becoming a major TV producer, all these incredible things that he did. What I've seen, I met him in his early to mid 80s. So when I think about, of course, it's fascinating. You could listen to him talk forever, his amazing career. But, in some ways, what's been cool about knowing him is that I've seen him as a guy who accomplished incredible things, but, loves his family. He's a grandfather and a great-grandfather, and, he loves to reminisce. But, above all, he has a real positive attitude towards life. And, he's, it's crazy to think about when you live that long, you lose so many people, and so many of these iconic musicians that he knew aren't around anymore. And so in some ways it's amazing just to see back to the same old questions, like what really matters in life, Yeah. Is it accomplishing these amazing things? Sure, that's important, but to even see somebody who's accomplished that much enjoy life in the simple things, still likes to just listen to music, still likes to sit and write music by hand, spend time with your family, there's definitely something to take away from that.
I could talk to you about this all day, but they're going to pull you out of here in a minute. So, but I've been really enjoying having conversations on the show recently with artists who sort of were the nadir or like were the apex of cool, and then the great ones sort of questioning that and going, okay, fine, but what really matters? What do I want for the rest of my life now? And I think Vampire Weekend are a really great example of that, and I really love the record. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.